It's do or die tonight for the New York Islanders, and tonight's game may be the biggest challenge yet. We'll talk about some possible lineup changes and what the Islanders have to do to stay alive. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Tuesday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it's a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now. It's free on the App Store or Google Play. We've got a jam-packed show for you today. But first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, you can email us at lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever it is that's on your mind. You can also follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you can follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all year long. And I am live tweeting during every Islanders home and road game. So join me for some instant insight and analysis. And it's great to talk Islanders hockey with you, game time or anytime. Game 5, Islanders, Hurricanes tonight, 7:30 Eastern time start. And again, you could hear every minute of that game with the Islanders hometown broadcast on SiriusXM. Just go to the SXM app and do a search for Islanders. As we know, Islanders trailing in the series 3-1, and it's win or go home. And I'll say this game, Game 5 tonight, is probably the Islanders' biggest challenge in the series. Why? Because the series is now shifting down to Raleigh. It's a road game. That gives the Hurricanes a couple of edges. Obviously, they have the last change, so Rod Brind'Amour can get the matchup he wants. That is going to mean matching up Sebastian Aho's line against Matthew Barzal's. So we'll see whether or not, Patrick Roy can avoid that matchup. And then it also means that the fans are going to be behind the Hurricanes, and certainly it makes it easier for the Canes to get the momentum going. So this game is the biggest challenge. But if the Islanders win it, they gain confidence. That's 2 wins in a row, and the series heads back to Long Island. And all of a sudden, the pressure shifts to the Carolina Hurricanes. But to do that, to bring the series back to Long Island, the Islanders are going to have to win. Now, Patrick Roy making an announcement, a couple of announcements ahead of this game. The first one, hardly a surprise, Semyon Varlamov will be the Islanders' starting goalie in Game 5. And here's what Roy said about that. He said, "I can tell when Varley is focused and in his zone. He's playing very simple. He's square. He's big in the net, and everything looks easy. Even difficult saves look easy. So he's in his position well. He's challenging the shooter. I could tell he's on top of his game." So far, even though the Islanders have lost 2 of the 3 games that Varley started, his goals against average in the series, 2.08. His save percentage, 9.30. He made 42 saves in the double overtime win on Saturday. No surprise that Semyon Varlamov will get the start. Now, the other announcement is a little more complicated. Matt Martin, still out with a lower body injury, and at Monday's practice, Patrick Roy announcing Matt Martin will not be ready to go for game number 5. So he will travel with the team down to Raleigh, but he is not going to be able to play. And as to why he's traveling, he's a leader on our team. Guys want him to be around, and I totally get that. The question is, who steps into the lineup in Martin's absence? And in game 4, we saw Ruslan Ishkakov step in. And I think the problem with that, the reason we're not going to see that happen again, clearly Patrick Roy did not have a lot of confidence in Ishkakov in this game. I mean, the game went 82 minutes, was it? And in that amount of time, you basically barely saw Ishkakov on the ice. So, given that set of circumstances, that here is a game that goes into double overtime, and yet you have a player, a forward, who plays less than 6 minutes out of the 81 minutes and 24 seconds that the game lasted. So clearly, Ishkakov, they don't have confidence in him. Whether they should or not is a different story. And I think another part of the equation is this. Ishkakov, ideally, is a top 6 forward. He is a guy who brings a little more dynamism, a little more offense. His checking, because of his size, his defense, because of his size and NHL inexperience, is more of a question mark. So maybe you can get away with putting him on the second line, maybe even the third, but the fourth line is just not a great fit. Now, it was Simon Holmstrom who was skating on the fourth line with Kyle McLean and Cal Clutterbuck during line rushes at Monday's Islanders practice. And I think Holmstrom makes a little more sense in some ways than Ishkakov, because Holmstrom can play a little bit more on the fourth line. He is defensively responsible. He will back check. He will play that role better than Ishkakov. If I were to start Ishkakov in this game, I would move Hudson Fasching down to the fourth line and put Ishkakov on the second line. That would be the switch I would make if I was keeping Ishkakov in the lineup. You could also go with Holmstrom, who I think makes more sense in a fourth line capacity, and I don't think the Islanders will do this either, you still have Julien Gauthier, a guy with a lot of NHL experience, a guy who will give you speed, just like either Ishkakov or Holmstrom, but gives you perhaps a little more dynamism to his game than Holmstrom. But again, if you're filling a guy in on the fourth line, maybe the Islanders are looking for that steady defensive presence. And remember, because the Hurricanes are the team that has the last change, the lineup, the matchups that you want are going to be harder for the Islanders to get to. And that is going to be a challenge. So I think they will go with Simon Holmstrom. That is my gut feeling, and it's also based on what happened Monday at practice. But, this is the playoffs. We know how this works as far as, the teams are concerned. They generally try to not give away as much as possible, and we'll see whether or not, what Patrick Roy does in practice is what he ends up doing once the game actually starts. I think they're going to go with Holmstrom and play him on the fourth line. If they go with Ishkakov, I would hope they would move Fasching down. They didn't do it in game 4, but I still think it makes more sense. But again, for the Islanders, no margin for error here. And with that being the situation, I just don't think Lou Lamoriello and Patrick Waugh and the front office and the brass of this team trust an inexperienced player like Ishkakov, who has played one NHL game that had no meaning in the standings, and then 6 minutes of one playoff game where clearly they were not confident that he could come in and get the job done. I think they go with Holmstrom, put him on the fourth line, and we'll see what ends up being the decision. But that's where the Islanders are at the moment. We have got more to get to on today's show. The Islanders reported to have signed a Swedish goalie with NHL experience. We'll talk about that. We'll talk a little bit about what Patrick Waugh is telling his team ahead of Game 5, what the keys to victory are, and for our Islanders' birthday of the day, a very popular defenseman, physical defenseman from the late 80s through the mid-90s and all the way to the late 90s, actually, who actually finished his career with the New York Rangers and St. Louis Blues. Let's see if you can guess who that is. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low. You're not sure if you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. You could play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. Make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball or charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb that leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft is available now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft, available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So the Islanders make a move, and it's not official yet, but there are multiple reports out there right now that the Islanders are going to add a Swedish goalie, and these reports are actually coming out of Sweden, and that goalie is Marcus Hogberg, who basically has played with the Ottawa Senators. He was with the Senators in 2018, 2019, 2019, 2020, and 2020, 2021 before heading back to Sweden. Now, Hogberg, 29 years old. He will turn 30 in late November. He's originally a third-round pick by the Senators in 2013, and he has played a grand total of 42 career NHL games, has a 3.39 goals against average and an 894 NHL save percentage. Now, again, some of the teams he was playing for in Ottawa, they were not strong defensive teams. So he is dealing with a situation during his tenure that, made it tough for him to be ultra successful. But here's the thing, and I think it's kind of important to keep in mind. Right now, first of all, last year in Sweden, he had a 914 save percentage and a 2.51 goals against average in 40 games. And that's solid numbers in Sweden. Now, the Islanders right now we know Ilya Sorokin, Semyon Varlamov. That's the 1-2 punch. Both are under contract. Sorokin is starting the first year of this big contract. And, next year, that'll get underway, the 8-year extension that he signed. And Varlamov has 3 more years left on his deal, and he has a no-trade clause. The goalies that the Islanders have right now in the AHL, you have Jakub Skarek, who is 24, struggled again this year. Now, again, Bridgeport doesn't give him a good team in front of him either, but 7 wins, 22 losses, 6 overtime or shootout losses, and an .888 save percentage. That's not great. And at this point, Skarek cannot be considered a real quality prospect. Now, Ken Appleby, who did play part of one period for the Islanders, this year when Varlamov was hurt, he's an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. So it is likely that Appleby is not re-signed by the Islanders organization. And basically, Hogberg comes in, splits time with Skarek, and maybe, you have Henrik Tikkanen, who played in the ECHL but got called up to the AHL and played pretty well there. And then you have Tristan Lennox, who, is still early on in his development. He, this year was his rookie year. So basically, if Skarek is back, Tikkanen unlikely to be full-time in Bridgeport. We'll see, how the organization handles Appleby, Skarek, Hogberg. It's going to be an interesting situation. But basically, this signing of Hogberg gives the Islanders organization a little more depth, a veteran presence in Bridgeport, and hopefully helps Bridgeport be a little bit better this year or next year, because this team in Bridgeport has really struggled. And, Tristan Lennox, who is considered maybe the better candidate or prospect, again, he'll be entering his 2nd year as a pro, and he's just not ready yet for the NHL. So that is that update. It gives the Islanders some veteran experience, and we'll see, what happens with the goaltending situation in both in Bridgeport, in the ECHL, and what have you. But at least a move being made to add some depth there for the New York Islanders, and that is important for the organization. Meanwhile, for the Islanders, well, again, it is a do-or-die situation. And I am going to say a couple of things about this. First of all, the Islanders have to be smart in this game. Got to stay out of the penalty box. That goes without saying. We know how much the PK has struggled. We know how good the power play is for the Hurricanes. I mean, over the course of the season, 2nd best power play in the league. So the Islanders obviously have to be aware of that and ready to, be smart. And I know there have been some questionable calls, but overall, you know what? That's hockey. And they're going to go both ways, these questionable calls. You can complain all you want. You still have to kill the penalties. And that's something that the Islanders just haven't been able to do. And I think the other thing is this: scoring the first goal is going to be very important for the New York Islanders. And if they don't get the first goal, they darn well better get the second goal, because we know what Carolina can do with a lead, how they shut you down, how they make it difficult for you to get shots. And, you sort of look back at all of the games in this series. Game 1, the Islanders, probably their best overall effort of the games they lost, where they had 34 shots. But again, most of them on the perimeter. Game 2, 12 shots on goal for the Islanders in the entire game. Game 3, which I think the Islanders were the better team for most of the game, they did manage, again, 31 shots, but again, Anderson was outstanding. And then, in the double overtime game, the Islanders did manage 35 shots on goal. But again, that was in a little more than 4 periods. So score first, preferable. Score second. If you can't score first, don't be down 2-0. I think that's important. And if you score first and take that lead, do not go into the shell that we have seen the Islanders go into far too often. All right, we have got more to get to on today's show. We'll talk about some of the things Patrick Roy is telling his team to try to get them ready for this vital Game 5. We'll have our Islanders birthday of the day, all that and more still to come on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball is now in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. And Islander fans, check out the odds and the prop bets for tonight's game in Carolina. Maybe you want to bet on the Islanders to win. Maybe you can get good odds on who will score the first goal, how many points Matthew Barzal will have. There's so many options on FanDuel. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. So Patrick Roy is trying to get this team ready. And it's not going to be easy. The crowd is certainly going to be excited if you're, rooting for your team and they have a chance to put a series away and face the New York Rangers in the second round. I think, Roy is trying to get this team prepared. So here's what he had to say. What do you guys want? We could tell you all the stories in the world about the comebacks that happened, but now's the time for them to make their own story. It's up to them to decide what they want. I think they enjoy each other. They love to play for this logo. They love to play in front of these fans, and no, they don't want to see it end, and they want to push it. I mean, think about it. I could be wrong here, but in my statistics, we're 11-2-1 in our last 14 games. We had our backs against the wall for a long time. And when you think about it, because we made the playoffs by 3 points. So it's not something new for this group. But that's why I'm saying a lot that I was extremely proud of them because of how resilient they were, how hard they've been working, and how they want to keep going. And that's what I appreciate most in this group. Matthew Barzal. There's obviously a hill to climb. We dug ourselves a pretty deep hole, but the hole got a little smaller after the last game. And as long as you have belief and passion, anything can happen. Anything is possible. So we definitely believe in the locker room. A little bit of it, too, is everyone loves each other, and we don't want things to end. Roy is trying to reinforce in this team that they control their own destiny, that it is definitely a challenge to try to come back from a 3-0 deficit. It hasn't happened often, but hey, the Islanders have done it. 1975, first 7-game playoff series in Islanders history, and they were down 3-0 to the Pittsburgh Penguins, won Game 4 on the island, won Game 5 in Pittsburgh, Game 6 on the island, and then a 1-0 shutout by Chico Resch with the only goal by Ed Westfall. And the Islanders won 1-0 and completed that comeback to become only the second team as of then in NHL history to win a series, best of 7 series, after losing the first 3 games. This Hurricanes team is better on paper than the Islanders. This team is a challenge, and the Islanders don't match up well with Carolina. We've talked about that every dayers on the show. But they have a chance right now to bring the series back to Long Island. And if they can win tonight at 7:30 Eastern time, and again, you could hear every minute of the game on Sirius XM with the Islanders hometown radio broadcast. Go to the SXM app, do a search for Islanders. If they can win tonight, the momentum in the series really shifts. You're back before your home crowd, and you have a much better chance of evening the series because, let's face it, Game 7, all the pressure shifts back to Carolina. Patrick Roy is reminding this team, it's in your own hands. Go out and make it happen. Now we see if they're able to pull it off, get it done, and keep the season alive. It's going to be an exciting game tonight. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. And today is the 56th birthday of former Islanders defenseman Rich Pilon, the Saskatoon, Saskatchewan native, a 7th-round pick of the Isles back in 1986, made his debut in the NHL with the Islanders in 1988-89. Pilon was a hitter. He was a defensive defenseman, not afraid to drop the gloves. Twice had more than 200 penalty minutes for the Islanders, including 291 penalty minutes in 1997-98. Big part of the 1993 run to the conference final. Pilon played in 631 NHL games, 8 goals, 77 points, 1,745 penalty minutes. He played in 15 playoff games, all of them coming in 1993 when the Islanders made that run. 6 foot, 216 pounds. After leaving the Islanders at the end of the 1999-2000 season, he was claimed off waivers by the Rangers, played there for part of 2 seasons, and then played 8 games for the Blues in 2001-2002 before retiring. One of his better games offensively as an Islander, February 23rd, 1997, Islanders hosting the Penguins at the Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum. Patrick Lalime, the goalie for the Penguins. The goalie for the Islanders, Tommy Salo. And 6 minutes and 11 seconds into the game, Rich Pilon gets the Isles on the board, his first of the year. Kenny Janssen and Todd Bertuzzi with the assists. The Islanders go on to beat the Penguins by a score of 4-1. Salo with 27 saves. Islanders outshoot the Pens 37-28. But for Rich Pilon, he had a goal. He was a +2. He had 3 shots on goal. And, oh, yeah, he did indeed drop the gloves in what was a very fight-filled first period. Dave Roach and Rich Pilon having a fight at the 11:57 mark of the first. So only an assist keeping Rich Pilon away from the elusive Gordie Howe hat trick in this game. But Rich Pilon, tough as nails, great teammate, great defenseman, hard-hitting, and a real part of Islanders culture in the 90s. He is our Islanders birthday of the day. I want to thank everyone again for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow on the show, we will have our key takeaways from Game 5, and hopefully we'll start to talk about Game 6. If not, well, then we'll start to, get our off-season coverage underway. But we will have our key takeaways from Game 5 on tomorrow's show. Have a great day, everybody. Enjoy the game tonight. Stay safe. And of course, let's go Islanders.